Yes, yes, it's a little yeah, I guess it just depends on, yeah, it's a lot to print. You might want to read it online. But since you printed it already,
Yeah, I printed it because I didn't want to. I'm like, oh, this seemed like it's really important, good information.
it is. Yes, it is. I'm
I didn't know it was so many pages. I'm like, oh
right.
my goodness.
Yes, I hear that. Well, alhamdulillah, you can keep it for your toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly use it for mine to help me get through those moments, those moments when the devices want to be in charge.
Yes.
Yeah, when they want to take the lead. Alhamdulillah. So just a few keys to success, which we always review. And I was thinking about this a couple of days ago, come empty. And then the next one says, bring only your life to this process. So those are kind of contradictory, right? I'm saying come empty, but bring your life to this process. So really come empty. I just want to qualify that and say that what we mean by that is come just open and ready to learn and willing. This all starts with willingness and a willingness to self-reflect and look at oneself. And so that's really what we mean by come empty. And then, as I said, bring only your life to this process because it is essential that you do that. Bring only your life to this process. Your experience, by your life, we mean your experiences. Be open and willing to identify and let go of unbeneficial ideas, habits, beliefs, and behaviors. Be present, reflect and meditate. Ask God for help. Remember Him often. Attend all sessions. Do the work. Your liberation is your choice. The only way out is in. So, as I mentioned, we're here talking about liberation therapy, our parental heritage. I'll just give you a quick review off of the top of my head. So, we started out reviewing the history of relational heritage, or sometimes we call it the historical heritage, where we looked at the big picture and how our relationships with other people and other groups and relationships between groups are formed and how they were formed since way back when historically, right? And so and we call it historical heritage and historical inheritance is because those are relationships that we have inherited. And so we reviewed Europe's uh, expansion within Europe and how that took place, and then they're transplanting that same model of expansion into other parts of the world, such as Africa and America. And it's happened everywhere. It's not just those countries, but those are the ones I shared with you because those are connected to my own background. Um, and how that has shows up in our world today and how that's influenced our relationship, um, not only with Europeans but with one another, and how that shaped us as human beings, as people, how it's caused us to take on certain identities, certain labels. So now once America is formed, then I'm an American, or Scotland, I'm Scottish or Irish or French, or but at one time those places did not exist, and I was just a person with a name, right? And so as those places, those borders began to be drawn and formed, um, then we began to also develop these senses of identity. And along with those senses of identity came uh, these complexes and the vices, right? So, as they're shaping these territories and building these borders, somebody is taking someone else's territory. Someone is dominating over someone else. So in comes arrogance and superiority and inferiority complexes and just this disregard of the other, the non-respect of differences, we not respecting the difference of the other, uh, imposing our ideas, or one group opposing their ideals onto another, saying, no, you need to speak our language. You need to grow food like we grow food. You need to dress like we dress. And like your way doesn't even matter. And so that model has been reproduced across the globe, and we still see the remnants. It's not even remnants, it's prevalent today. And so the aim with that was really to help us reflect on our own labels and how those historical relationships are playing out in our lives today, right? And so that means how do if you are African American, for example, right? Because I'm African American, so I have to use that as an example. How does that influence how you relate to Europeans or white people in America, right? And that whole historical narrative around or experience and narrative around slavery, and how it still shows up today in this world, and how does that influence us, and how does it take away, even more importantly, how does it take away from our ability to connect with another person? How does it take away from my ability as an African American to connect with a white person, for example? And because of that historical heritage, not because of my interaction with that person one to one, but because of some idea about them that I've inherited and that I carry with me as some as a preconceived notion. And so it creates a barrier between human beings, and those are barriers that we need to be able to overcome, as did the peacemakers. And so they worked for the benefit of the whole. They worked for the benefit of all those around them, not just one group. And so in the same with the prophets, right? And so our aim is really to follow in their footsteps, and be able to overcome those barriers and transform them into something that's beneficial, so that somebody has to bring, I mean, God works through people, right? And so who is responsible for bringing peace into the world? I always wonder that. And who is it? I think one of the Kennedys said, if not you, then who? Right? And so, okay, so after the historical relational heritage, we jumped into the parental heritage. We looked at the aspect, the viewpoint from a child. I think we're going to, actually, I wasn't going to really review that, but let me jump to that real quick. So we talked about how in our childhood, we tend to hold on to the negative experiences that we experience when we're children. We're always watching our parents, our children are always watching us. And all they know to do is to mimic, because we are their example, or whoever raises us or whoever's raising them, that's their example. And that's how they learn how to judge. That's how they learn values, that this is my family, that these people right here are what is family, right? So this slide talks about universal values. This is referring to really understanding that we're all from the same source. We're all connected to Hawa, Adam, as in terms of humankind, right? Human beings. We're all connected back to two parents. And so, to me, in my understanding of family, that makes us all related, right? Whether distant relations or not, right? We're all related to one another. And so there's a broader understanding of what family is, and to only limit our concepts of family to one small group of people takes away from our understanding of how interconnected we are with one another. And then we talked about children really being these sponges, and how they're conditioned. I think Dr. Bruce Lipton said to the age of 7, children are in this mode of being just taking in, and developing these judgments. And what happens is, as they grow older, they're living their life based on what they see, and based on how they judged mommy, or based on how they judge daddy. Mommy always gives me what I want, so I love her. Daddy never gives me what I want, so he's mean, he's bad. I never want to marry a husband like that. When I grow up, I won't have a husband like that. And that it starts there. And so, of course, that a child is not conscious that they're doing that. That's just what's happening, and it's what happens. It's normal. And so this is how the conditioning process happens. And so we're looking at peeling back the layers of those conditionings. And as children grow, again, based on how they view their parents, based on how they see their parents living their lives and expressing themselves and how their parents treat them, they begin to understand the world through these particular lenses, which are really based in these four main concerns of human activity is really human needs, starting with the having, right? Because in society, and it's not just, I almost said American society, but it's really society as a whole, the having is what drives us. So we do so that we can have more, or actually we want to have, so then we do, and so that we can be some, whatever it is we're trying to be, so that we can tax on another label to ourselves, right? Instead of starting with the understanding that our being is complete. The way God put us in this world is complete. We don't need to add anything to it. We don't need it is absolutely complete. And when we start with that understanding, then our life takes a different trajectory, right? And because everything you're no longer doing in order to be something, because we understand that we are complete already. And so it takes us off of that hamster wheel that I definitely am quite familiar with. It takes us out of those conditions of being in really enslaved to this system, to the system of common sense. We talked a lot about common sense and what that means, and that's really how the world commonly views things, what is socially acceptable in the social order. And in the historical heritage, we talked a lot about the social order, because that's where the conditioning, all of this conditioning that we're talking about comes from. And so that's really it for that. I believe that's sufficient for the review. But before I jump into the vices, which is where we left off last time, has anyone had any reflections based on what we discussed last time, the parental heritage? Any questions, comments, concerns, anything come up for anything since we last met? Anything?
Yeah, this is Sister Fatima. It was very, very hard and difficult emotionally for me to see the devastation of the Native Americans and to hear all those things that, I'll just say, people did to the Africans and Native Americans. It's very hard for me to, it was very hard for me to look at that. I heard about it, but I just like internalized it. So it was very difficult to see all that. Just for me, I'm over it, but just it was. It was just no. I just noticed it. I talked to Sister Habiba. I just noticed that how I felt after that. It was very draining for me to see things like that. So everything is good, but just seeing all that kind of thing, I don't really want to. I don't want to see that. It's too much. It's just too draining. So
yeah.
Okay, I know we have to know that some people don't know about that, and they have to know. But for people that know, it's emotionally draining and it brings back memories. So, but we're good, Sister Khadija. Shukran.
Alhamdulillah. I appreciate that, Sister Fatima. I definitely uh, can relate. What I'm hearing is that it that it made you like uncomfortable, because I think
Very,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, I can relate. I certainly can. And it when I was actually pulling that information together, it was very challenging. And I think that really that's why I incorporated that into this, because the point of it in sharing it, and I want to really add that the reason why I shared that part of it is because from, like I said, this process of the initiatory way to peace is really about you bringing your life to this process, right? So that historical heritage, that narrative connected back to slavery and Willie Lynch, right? That was very difficult. And what happened with the what's happening with the Native Americans. And I think it's important for us to see that we use it in the past tense, but these things are still in play, but under different names, right?
Exactly.
And so it is important for us to know that, because not only is it in play in our society, but it's in play within us. And I'll tell you how it started. I created a training for my children because I don't remember why I was reading Willie Lynch, but I had read it before, but whatever I was in the experience of at that particular time, I I saw it in my family, in my children, in my relationship with my children. You know how it talked about, and I don't know if some of the Willie Lynch stuff I actually took out that was in there before, but when it talked about that you have to train the mother so that she brings up the children as really as slaves to, you know, to the plantation, but you have to focus on the mother and train her. Um, and I saw these things playing out in my own family. And I knew that my children were not aware of it because I wasn't even aware of it until I read it. I'm like, oh my God, that's happening right now. That's how we're treating one another. And and so I had created this what was it called? Thing I can't think of it. Some training for my children, and where I wanted to help, you know, just bring it to their consciousness that this was written down and that this was intentional and that it was part of their programming because an hour. I don't mean to say their, but our, because they got it from me. That was their example, right? I was their unconscious example, and so I really appreciate you sharing that. I definitely received that because even in pulling it together, it's difficult. It's difficult. Even now, I see things. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's so challenging. But I think part of the challenge is to just looking at our own historical heritage. I don't know about your background, but in terms of like my grandparents and their parents, they didn't pass on any history. They passed on very little history, and so I didn't have the benefit because of the pain, right? So we didn't get the benefit of their lessons, the lessons that they learned, the benefit of their experiences, and so this gives us kind of the intention is also to give us a lens through which to view what they were experiences to kind of fill in the gap so we understand, because sometimes we blame them. I know there was a time when I blamed my grandma. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she share her history with me? Because, like you say, the pain. But then we end up with generations of people who don't get the benefit of that wisdom, that knowledge. It's only through experience that wisdom and knowledge is gained. Anyone else? All right, we're gonna move on. The child's assessment of relationships with I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to a particular slide. Let me jump to it. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna ask a question I don't know if we did this one. And this is not to, I mean, you can answer if you want. It may, I'm thinking it may be it can be difficult to answer. Have we noticed in the last couple of weeks any of our own vices? If you want to, you can name them. If you don't want to, you don't have to name them. But have we been able to notice any of these, for example, showing up in our own lives? Pride, arrogance, shame, conceit, vanity, tendency to charity, showing off. No, no vices. I know it's a hard question to ask, but that's what we're here for. And you don't have to be specific, I mean, to answer, but you don't have to be specific, but this is what we're here for.
Sister Khadija, can I ask a question? If you say for example, I see something, okay, and if you see something and it look, okay, I'm trying to think of, you see something and, okay, say for example, I see a policeman beat somebody. No, I don't want to use that, okay. I see something that I don't like, but just because I don't like it, does that mean I'm judging it because I don't like it? I may see somebody do something and I said, okay, that's not a good thing to do. Am I automatically judging it because it may be bad behavior? Am I judging it just because I don't like it? Am I automatically judging it? Or you see what I'm saying?
Yes, let me give you the best answer I know to give is the example of, and I know you know this example already, of Musa, the prophet Musa, and Khidr, right?
Right, yes.
Musa saw Khidr kill somebody, break a family's boat, right? And then not build the wall because the people wouldn't pay them to build it.
Right.
And Musa, every time Musa judged him.
Right, okay, all right, okay,
So,
all right.
Does that answer your question?
You know what? It answers my question, and not only that, it gives me something to think about. So I'm gonna think about that. Okay, it answers my question, but it's good because I'm gonna use that and I'm gonna work with that. So that's something. Okay. That's some extra homework for you. But thank you. I really appreciate that example. You're good, sister. Alhamdulillah.
Mashallah, mashallah. That's what I use when my judgment comes up, right? Because I think that the point, I mean, what I take away from that story is that what we see with our eyes, remember, we're always looking through our conditioning.
Right.
We're always looking through these vices, consciously or unconsciously. And it's usually unconsciously that we're looking, we literally have on some glasses of the glasses of pride or the glasses of arrogance, and the glasses of the way I do things is right and the way they do things is wrong. And we don't understand that ayah that I shared before, I don't have it handy, but where Allah says that everything is in obedience to him. So that's that lens of the intelligence of the real. That the reality is that we don't know, and that Allah, everything is all. Allah says that all in Quran. He says that all is obedient to him. And so, if everything is obedient to him, even that person over there who's killing somebody or breaking that boat, right? They're in obedience to God, and we don't know what God told them to do, or if we don't know that relationship. We barely even know our own, right? We're working on understanding our own relationship with the Creator. So we can't. It's dangerous to make those judgments because our vision is skewed at this point. And there was an ayah I shared. I don't know where. Hopefully, maybe it'll come up later. So, so I want to just remind us that this is the point of our work. We're on the, it says.
Can I add something?
Yes, you can ask or add. Yes.
Hello, Khadija.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's to complete what you were saying, because my impression of all these vices is that as I put on the chat a sentence I love from Rumi, which says, somewhere beyond right and wrong there is a garden, I will meet you there.
Yeah.
And what I understand is that all these vices involve that we are somehow judging that someone is wrong or someone is right, or I am wrong or I am right. So for me, it helps me to see if I am having this kind of thoughts, then I might be in one of these vices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say it's the difference between thinking, okay, this, I don't like it, or this hurts some of my feelings, or I'm not comfortable with this situation. For me, it's totally different to say that than to say it's wrong. It's just to have the conscious that it's for me only. It's not wrong in general.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I am.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, Mathilde. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. You sound like one of my teachers, Sheikh Perbokas. He has a French accent, and he always uses that same quote from Rumi.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So on the lookout, it says on the lookout, a group discussion. So it really should say on the look in, right? So the hardest thing, and some of you know, some of you saw that I am in the WhatsApp group that I was asking for some help to pay for a class in nonviolent communication. And alhamdulillah, thank God, I was able to be able to collect the funds to do that. And I started last night, and I have another class this evening and tomorrow. It's actually 9 days. So I'm very excited about that. But what I'm seeing is that, and what I've been in the experience is the difficulty of looking inside, right? Of seeing these things. I really appreciate what Mathilde said as using these as a tool. These vices as a tool to be able to see whether or not we are in judgment, right? They can help us understand and help us understand how we're judging, or the judgment helps us understand what vice we're in. It can go both ways. So this is the work, to be able to look at ourselves and see these things, because they are so subtle and they are the lens through which we view our entire world. And there's a quote I used before by Sheikh Abdullah J, where he says something to the effect that in order for us to be healed, we first have to know we're sick. Right? So these are the sicknesses. And if we can't look, if we can't take an honest look, and believe me, I understand that it is a challenge. It is a challenge, but it takes practice. And part of the reason, it's like the cycle, we're afraid of judgment, right? We're afraid to say that I have some jealousy in my heart, or some envy, or I still feel spite towards somebody, or a grudge towards someone who offended me at some point in time. Yeah, I think I'm something special because I have a PhD, right? Or a master's degree, or a high school diploma, right? So I may be conceited or vain or in vanity because of those things. And so, but these are the things that we need to look for because it influences our relationships. Remember, our ultimate aim is to become a being of peace, the vicegerents, to regain our fitra, our natural state. Do we think if we think about the peacemakers? I'll name some. Wangari Maathai, probably may not be very familiar with her. She's one of my favorites. Eleanor Roosevelt, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, Sharon Ibadi, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, just to name a few, Muhammad Yunus. If you look at their lives, you will see that they did not display these characteristics. They worked through them. They worked through them and they placed their lives in the service to humanity and were able to come out cleaned of these. They transformed these. And it wasn't that they got rid of them. It wasn't that they may have never had them, right? But they transformed them through their service to humanity. And so that's really our aim. But first, the aim is to be able to look inside and recognize this. So I'm going to jump to my vices slide, which we were, or PowerPoint, which we were on last time. And we'll just talk a little bit. We won't go into too much depth about all of these, but we will discuss them. Where's my PowerPoint? Yeah, last time we looked at show presenter view and arrogance. Some of these are almost related. Last time I think we did conceit, right? This is from Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. And Uthman Danfodio, Sheikh Uthman Danfodio, who is also from West Africa. So let me go back, sorry. So purifying the keys to purifying the heart from the whisperings of the enemy of mankind. So remember the relational heritage, our original relationship with Shaitan, right? That's who we're referring to when we say the enemy of mankind. So the first key is to seek refuge with God from Shaitan and reject the thought that occurs. And these are from Uthman Danfodio as well. Remember God with the tongue and the heart. Reflect on the proofs of the people of the path, the proofs of the people who have walked the path, and then ask someone who knows the path. So those are some keys to purifying the heart. So we're talking about practical ways to purify our hearts from these vices, because when we're in the thick of it, we all know, right? When someone upsets us or someone does something that we don't like, and we are habituated to judging. We are habituated to pointing the finger at looking at externally at the tip of that iceberg. Remember the iceberg graphic? We are conditioned to look outside instead of looking inside of here. So remember, this is always a pointing to help us get in the habit of looking inside and looking for the vice, and actually looking for experiences that lift those vices up in us so that we can transform them, so that we understand that they are there, right? Remember the sinusoidal life with the ups and downs of life, the highs and lows, and where those valleys were, those low points, those challenges, those trials, those difficult moments in life, those ones we don't like to face, that we would rather do without, that we would rather not experience, the ones that we're always asking for ease with, those are the ones we don't want to face, but those are the ones that are designed to wake us up. They're supposed to, there's a Sheikh Ali Endow says those are the airbag moments. So there's an opportunity. We always want to be cushioned by the airbag. We want the blow to be softened, right? Instead of letting our forehead hit the steering wheel and wake us up out of this metaphysical sleep we're in. And so we are conditioned to stay away from the difficult. But the difficult in reality are opportunities to wake us out of this sleep. And so going back to the slide, finding remedy for every vice, there is both a knowledge cure and an action cure. For the cure for every fault is its opposite. That for me has been a lifesaver, is applying the opposite in very practical terms when the vices show up. So if something tells me, well, to be in reaction to someone else's behavior. So maybe, let me think, maybe somebody didn't clean off the stove, so now I'm not going to wash the dishes. You know, this is a thought in my head, right? So the opposite is wash the dishes, right? So do the opposite of what the thought is, right? And it has proved very, very effective. It has proved very, very difficult, but it fights, it balances out, it counters the nafs, the power of the nafs, because they're very they're very powerful inside of us. And so nafs has been, to clarify, the nafs has been defined by some as the soul. And Allah talks about our corrupted soul in the Quran, that we have this corrupted soul. And so, and then the last remedy is useful knowledge, is that which shows to any that is endowed with it his own failing. So as I mentioned before, those things that lift up these vices, don't run from them. Look for them. That's what Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba did. That's what all the peacemakers did. They saw racism, they saw sexism, they saw man's injustice to mankind, and they stood up to it with the intention, with the understanding that this would help them grow into their being.
Khadija, I have one question.
Yes.
What is a fault regarding to a vice? Is it somehow similar, or is fault consequence from a vice?
Ask that again for me, Mathilde. So
well, sorry, my question would be about the second sentence, the cure for every fault. Fault, could you define fault regarding to vice, for example? What is the difference?
I would call it vice, really. The cure for every vice is its opposite.
Okay, so it would be the same thing, fault and vice.
It would be the same thing. Yes, it would be the same thing. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, because a fault is really a judgment, right? And that's coming from my and I'm sorry, I never really got into the nonviolent communication piece, but I didn't want to go too deep into it. But it is really, just to share with you really quickly, for me so far, it's just really coming to understand, through sharing the initiatory way to peace with you all, I'm really coming to understand how powerful words are in our perpetuation of inner violence first, and then between one another, and how words can create these barriers between us because of our conditioned use of them. We were all taught to use words by our parents, by what we saw, in our households and then in school. And so, and that's common sense, right? How we use these words. But you see what's happening with the common sense in the world. Not all you see, but so much of what we see in the world today is violence and chaos, right? And so we are kind of in a cycle of using language, even though we're doing this work on the inside, looking within, our language is still coming across the same, and we're not often conscious of it. So the nonviolent communication course helps us really to be able to become conscious of our words, not only our words, but our needs and our feelings, which I have discovered. I have no idea I have had no idea what those are or were, like needs and feelings. It's a whole different level. But if we can't express that, then what comes out is the violence and the anger and the accusations and the judgment and the pointing of fingers if we don't learn how to express the needs and the feelings. So that's why I wanted to take the course and why I find the value in it, so that I can share with you all how that shows up in our lives, so that hopefully we can use it as a tool to begin to communicate with one another more empathically. Like I can more better put your shoes on my feet and understand where you're coming from, and that will allow me to share what's alive in me, and that will allow me to learn to hear what's alive in you when you talk, right? And that's where the connections are made, the real connections, and that's what we need in this world, right? Is connection, like real
And if
connections. Go ahead, Matilda.
yes, according to the list, how I understood the list of devices that you showed just before, my understanding is that all these are somehow judgments that are in the mind. So go over devices would be, my understanding would be that we connect to the heart. It's not devices, is not the heart speaking, is the mind.
Yes, that's right, because it's the mind that's been conditioned, not the heart. And so we're learning to really look beyond the mind, because the mind is, whew, I don't know about your mind, but mine's weak, right? It is definitely conditioned. And that's why when we go to school, they don't tell us, they don't want our hearts, they want our minds, because that's what's being formatted. And so we are here to learn to look at our hearts, which is at the root of all this. And thank you for pointing that out, Mathilde. That is a very, very good point. So last time we reviewed conceit, we reviewed conceit, and so I'll just read the top of it. Conceit is when you are, this is a definition. So as I mentioned last time we met, some are from the Masalik al-Janan, which I emailed to you, and the others are from the Sciences of Behavior by Uthman Danfodio. So this is a combination of their knowledge. So conceit is when you are happy with what you have and sure of it, right? That sounds like a good thing, right? Your joy is in it because it is a perfection and a blessing, not because it is a gift from God Most High. Your joy is in it because it is your attribute, and it is attributed to you. Your joy is not because it is related to God, since it comes from Him. Conceit is presumption about blessing, relying on it and forgetting its relationship to the giver of the blessing. The harm of conceit leads to pride, forgetting wrong actions, false hope, forgetting the blessings of God, self-deception, feeling safe from the anger of God, believing that you have a station with God, and self-justification by action, concept, and knowledge. You are not in reality the author of your good deeds. You are only a tool in God's hand. And then the next knowledge cure is to, have they shown up in your lives? They're in all of us, right? Because they come from the conditioning. We've all been conditioned by the same social order. And then the action cure is humility, to be humble. So I won't read that. I won't go into that. So because I want to get through these really quickly, inshallah. Trying to keep up with the time. Pride. So pride, I'll just say this: pride, conceit, arrogance, they all kind of run the same, at least the way in terms of how I understand them. But I just want to read them because some of the those people who know more than I do, they separated them out. So pride is arrogance, unmanifested. So it's internal, right? This is internal. And I want to, at the beginning, I didn't show you the beginning of the slide, but these are internal vices. There are also external vices. We are focused in only on those vices of the conditioned vices of the mind, right? And really they're in the heart too. Let me say that, because the issue is that our hearts have become attached. And the thoughts are in our minds, but our hearts have become attached to, it's really, the heart is attached to the having. And as a result of the having, the vices come about. And we'll talk more about that shortly, inshallah. Pride is arrogance unmanifested, the quality in the self, which is satisfaction and confidence at seeing the self above anyone towards whom he is overbearing. You see that you have a rank and another has a rank. Then you see your rank as above the other's rank. When you exalt your own value in relationship to someone else, you despise the one below you and put yourself above the other's company and confidence. When I first read this, it didn't connect for me. But as I read it more, and as I continue to read it more, it connects in different ways. Different parts of it connect. And it can be so subtle when this shows up. All of these, it can be so subtle, because who of us is going to say that we despise the one below us? None of us, right? So what one part I want to lift up is that these are not conscious vices. They are internal. And so these are just some ways to be able to identify them when they show up. The harm that pride does, it locks all doors to the garden, because it is impossible for you to want for another what you want for yourself, while there is anything of self-importance in you. Knowledge cure, to know and recognize yourself, is to know and recognize yourself, and to know and recognize your Lord. We all know the saying, the hadith, to know yourself is to know your Lord, right? So to bring these things back to our mind when the vice shows up. Know and recognize your limit, that this vice is in you. I have some pride. Can anyone relate to these so far? I need some feedback to conceit and pride. Walaikum assalam.
So it's funny, right before you asked if anyone has any feedback, I was thinking, like, this is so hard to, I think that this is my perpetual struggle and balance of coming from being oppressed and the process of healing and loving yourself and feeling proud of yourself, like all these, yes, like the positive, like, self-love and being proud of who you are, right? And like that balance of knowing pride is, but then pride is not a good thing. And it's like, as a person of color in Islam, me and have a friend of mine, we always talk about this. I said, we're like nothing, but we're everything. Like we have to be everything.
Yeah.
And I think about that in terms of my daughter. I was thinking this whole time, she's so, she has a very healthy upbringing and hasn't had oppressive situations. So she has a healthy self-esteem. But I sometimes wonder where that line goes, right? Where you become, like to be humble, to have humility. Right. So anyway, the struggle for me, putting my daughter aside for a second, because I think it's a different situation, but for me, coming from, again, in a traumatic and abusive background, to have, I'm always struggling with hoping that I'm doing, you know, in the right space. Because I think being submissive is not a problem for me, right? Like that comes naturally. It's the being taken advantage when you're submissive and being oppressed, and then coming out of that and saying, okay, no, I have a right, right? Like it's
right.
Anyway, it goes back and forth for me. Like, you know, it's like, you know, in Islam as a woman, I have rights, but yet I have to be submissive, but yet I have to do this. Like it's, you know, when do I exercise that voice and when do I, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so that's my,
Thank you, Sia. Thank you so much. I definitely I hear you. I can relate so much. That's real. That's so real. I think it's certainly real for me as well. It is certainly real. We don't know when to, I think about that. I used to think about it often, especially like you say, as a person of color. You know, it's like, you know, okay, we started out with the narrative that we are coming from, we're descendants of slaves. And then, you know, in the, I don't know, the 60s, the 70s, Black is beautiful. And, you know, then this whole Black Power movement. And, you know, as time went on, we developed a kind of sense of identity. And with that comes this pride. And now, you know, and now it's like, oh no, you have to be humble and you shouldn't be proud. And, you know, it's like this competing kind of ideologies. But I think that as I understand it, and as I've come to understand it, because I've reflected on that a lot, because I don't want to erase our experience, right? It's valuable. Like we say, bring your life to this process, bring your experiences to this process. And so all of that, our journeys, our journeys plural, are extremely important to understanding the other. And our aim is really to just be in the middle. But what is happening, we're not in the middle. We're in the conditioned state. In the example of the peacemakers, they weren't like, we use the term peacemakers and nonviolence. I think sometimes that's mistaken for like doing nothing and passivity, when in fact they were people who took a stand and people who fought and people who of courage. They just didn't use violence to do that. So you know, that's all I have on that. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure I understood well the end of the orange text, but what's appears to my mind is about ranking. And you talked about find the middle. Maybe the middle is behind ranking, because the sentence say you then see your rank as above the other rank. So maybe so pride is you rank yourself over the others. The other extreme, let's say, would be to rank yourself under the others, and then the middle is there is no rank.
Yes.
Something like this.
Yes. Yes, that's an excellent example. I think it's exactly like that, Mathilde. There is no rank. I'll give you my own personal example. I live here in a we used to, one vice also, it's not listed as this by this word, but it's competition. We say competition versus cooperation. So on one end of the spectrum is competition, and on the other end is cooperation. I'm sorry, someone came in the room. So I'm sorry, it was an interruption. So I'm in my husband has more than one wife. And so we live here together in the same house in Senegal. And so when I first came here, there was this, in Senegalese culture, there's this this prevalence of competition among wives. And like, that's not even a part of, that's not part of my culture. Even polygyny is not a part of my culture. But, you know, it was a choice I made, but the competition end of it is not something I'm familiar with. And I'm not naturally a competitive person. I'm just kind of really relaxed and go with the flow. So, you know, just using competition and cooperation as an example, and what Mathilde was saying about rank is really, you know, at some point I made a conscious decision. At the beginning, I was pulled into this kind of competition because it's what they do. For them, it's normal for wives to compete. But at some point, I just decided, you know, I'm not in competition. Like, I'm not participating anymore. And then there was peace. So like, there is no rank, right? They have this order in terms of wives, the first wife, the second wife, the third wife. The numbers don't matter to me. Like, based on when you married or whatever, I'm like, it doesn't matter. So that choice is available to us. And so it's really about understanding that we have more than the choices that are presented to us. And then it removes a lot of the vice. It helps to remove the envy. It removes the competition. It removes, I'm better than her, she's better than me. Any complexes, superiority, inferiority complexes, when we find that middle space. And that's the aim.
Yeah, and also, I don't know, we did not go yet to the shame vice, but I think it was mentioned in the list, the shame.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe the shame could be also that I rank people and I'm ranking myself under other people.
Yes. Yes, and that lines up with the inferiority complex. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. So, and
Khadija, I would like to thank you for sharing that, because it helps me get a better view, because I work in the corporate world and I work in a hospital where all the employees have these badges that have these status on it. Bachelor's, your master's, your doctor. Wow. Yeah, so, and they treat people accordingly. And it's really hard. It's really, really hard to be humble in an environment like that. So I relate to what you were saying, where you was working in the corporate world and you dislike it. So for me, it's like this here class has really helped me. But I do see a lot of anger come up sometime, and just a lot of dislike, because I'm like, why I'm here? And they treat people with their status. So to be in that environment, and for me not to do the same, be conditioned to treat others the way my environment is, it is a struggle. It is a struggle. So, you know, hopefully I can overcome that, because I know now is not the time for me to leave, but in my heart, I know this is not where Allah wants me to be at the present time, but it's not time for me to leave. So I have to be patient. But I'm in that environment where pride and all these other attributes is very, very in your face every day in order to make a living. So it's very, very hard. It's very, very hard. And I try to be humble. I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but being humble, for some people, finds that to be a weakness in you, especially if you're an older person. And okay, well, you know, Habiba's always going to say yes. She lets anything go. So they kind of treat you any kind of way. And it's very, very hard, especially in this country here. It's very, very hard, you know. So it's something that's a work in progress, and it's very, very hard.
Yeah. It is hard, Sister Habiba. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I'm a senior citizen, and that itself is a weakness.
Wow.
Years ago, seniors had respect, and their knowledge was respected, and they was respected. But now it's totally opposite.
Wow.
Your senior is like, I don't know. It's just not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Assalamu alaikum, sister. Don't feel bad. I'm a senior too. And I understand when you say that you don't want to, it's not time for you to leave your job because whatever it is.
Right.
But I am one person that left my job. I worked in the corporate world too. I made a decision. Do I want to continue on being this way? Because I got an answer to a law at the end.
Yes.
And I said, this is not worth it. For many, many years, I was in corporate world doing what they wanted me to do.
Right.
Everything I did perfect. I got awards, all this stuff, but it was wrong. So I made a decision that I either walk out on faith and know that that I'm doing the right thing.
Yes.
So I walked out on faith from a job. I resigned. They thought I was joking. I sent them a letter and they said, oh, she's just joking. They thought. I waited a whole 2 weeks before they made a decision to let me go. And I left that job. I didn't have another job. And I left this whole state and went to another state and started a new life over. It wasn't easy, but I had my faith. And I walked out on my faith and I became, oh my God. All I can tell you is that I'm glad I did it because now I know who I am because I didn't know who I was being there.
Yeah, it is confusing.
So,
Sister,
and I am a senior, but I decided, and I didn't have any, only skills I had was corporate skills. And I said, I'm going to have to use something that I already have. And I met a few people. I took my Shahada. That's how I started.
Sister Star, can I interrupt you, please?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Sister Habiba, what you said made me think of when we talk about the social order. It's a quote from Sheikh Ali Endow where he talks about the social order being the soil. It's the perfect environment for the vices. Right? It's like if you know anything about plants, they need the right soil, the right climate, the right moisture, the right environment. Everything. That's nature. Even our bodies need the correct things to be in good health. Right? The correct balance of things. So the social order, the corporate world, everything we see, every place we are, even in our family structures, that the social order is prevalent, is alive and well because we've all been conditioned. And so it's the perfect place for arrogance and pride. And so to them, so the people that you work with, it's so normal. It's actually not normal to have that competition and to not be recognized for your status and your degree. Right? It's actually antithetical to the social order to not do that. So it's I understand that it's definitely tough because it's like being in a foreign land almost when you become conscious of that, and it is certainly hard because you see it and you know it's not right and you feel it. But if I can offer a little bit of advice, may I?
Yes, because this has really it has magnified it tremendously.
Right, right. I can imagine.
It's like I go there for attitude,
Right. I can imagine. I don't even have to imagine. I've been there, and I would say just looking at this definition of pride, try to find there's another choice for you. And I'm not saying a choice outside of your job, right? But there's another choice inside of you that's available. Maybe there's more than one. So look for that choice. There are more options. There's something else available to you. Now, mind you, with that choice will come consequences, no matter what it is. But that's depends on where you're at, whether or not you're willing to deal with those consequences. And consequences don't mean something negative. It could be negative or, quote unquote negative or positive. It's just a consequence. I won't call it negative or positive, but it takes me back to the original title of this training, which was Nonviolence, a Choice. So there's always a set of at least one other choice, but usually a set of other choice that will allow us to step outside of the common sense, the social order, the violence that we see. It's there, but we have to be willing to look for it. And then when it shows up, we have to make a decision about if that's something we're willing to move forward with, because there's always consequences. But that's the beauty of the peacemakers. They understood the consequences and they moved forward in spite of them, knowing that their lives would be at stake, knowing that their livelihoods would be at stake, knowing that their family members' lives would be at stake. That there's some choices available to you, and maybe it's inside your job, maybe it's not, but that's up for you to see. But I know it's there. It's always there, because I've been in the experience that God has not bound us, right, in these positions. Those positions are there to help us get closer to Him, to help us free us. But it's those attachments that we have with our hearts that are the difficult part. Those are the difficulties. So I'm going to read this ayah on pride. Bismillah. From what, I'm reading the green on the slide. From what did He create him? From a sperm drop. He hath created him, and He then molded him in due proportions. Excuse me. Then does He make his path smooth for him. Then He caused him to die and puts him in his grave. Then when it is His will, He will raise him up again. By no means has he fulfilled what Allah has commanded him to do. So I like that last sentence. By no means has he fulfilled what God has commanded him to do, or has commanded him. I think it's important. I like that last sentence, because no matter how we try to do our best, we have there's no room for pride, and we certainly have not fulfilled. We are all faulty, like imperfect, and we're human. It's beautifully human. We are beautifully human. As Sia said, we're everything and we're nothing, right? But it's not because of anything that we've done. We didn't create ourselves. We didn't take us through this process that's described in this ayah. We're just God's tools. And so it helps to remember that, and to know that we're just always this work in progress. And that's okay, and that's good. That's what the journey is. Like, this is what it's about. Arrogance and superiority complex. So arrogance is pride manifested outwardly. The harm of, I put these two together. Sometimes they show up differently in our other presentations, but arrogance and superiority complex, the harm is that they entirely consume one's faith. Arrogance is the root of other vices. The knowledge cure for arrogance is to recall that you are shaped physiologically like every other human being, and that you were created from a single soul, and that ultimately we are not in the least different, right, physiologically. And then that we're superior to none. We are not superior to any other. And then I think it's No, it's not this I am. Okay, so then the action cure opposite is to humble yourself to, oh, this one is really deep when you read it, right? To humble yourself to people in a constrained, unnatural manner until it becomes natural for you. This is Usman Danfodio talking, right? So the action cure, the cure for arrogance and or for thinking you're better than somebody is to humble yourself to a people, to humble yourself to people in a constrained, unnatural manner until it becomes natural for you. Anybody want to comment on that? Because it's a big one. Anybody need clarification on that?
I would like an example, if somebody can give an example of how that to be done, because it seems like it's extremely hard.
It is extremely hard. I can give you.
I'm wondering.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say yes. Please give an example. I think that when I think about this, I can't relate to having a superiority complex to know how to do the opposite, right? Like this is not something that alhamdulillah I don't believe, only Allah knows that I suffer from. So I'm like, I'm already, as I mentioned earlier, it's easy for me to humble myself and to be more, so I can only imagine someone that, I don't know. Please give an example. Sorry, I know that wasn't helpful.
I don't know if it's an example, but it was where I only could bring my own self here. And I was in an apartment building and the people, I was living underneath some people and they knew they were doing what they were putting stuff in the vent. And I was smelling chemicals and cat urine and a whole bunch of other stuff. Anyway, make a long story short. So I would see them when I go downstairs and they would say, oh, hi, how are you? Now in my head, I'm saying I should just blast these people, but I'm going to humble myself and say, oh, I'm fine, thank you. How's everything? Knowing that they're doing this to me every night for 4 years, but I humble myself to say, hi, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? So to make a long story short, it came out to be that it worked out for me. Allah fixed it for me. I asked him to, and he did. I don't know if that's a good example, but that's all I can bring.
I think it's a great example, Sister Star. I think that could mean different things to different people, right? An unconstrained, unnatural manner. If it's easy for you to be humble, then it probably is. It would mean something different to you than it would to me, like a person who has been arrogant for most of her life, right? And so, and what it means and how it shows up would look differently. So it's totally up to your life experience to determine what that unnatural manner means, how far that goes and what's natural for you goes. My husband always tells me, how low can you go? And he's talking about in terms of humility. And it's not humility. I think we think of humility being towards or for the benefit of some person, right? Or the person we're dealing with. But the way I view humility is in front of my Lord, in front of God. And so if I'm humble to a person, is my intention to be, I'm humble in front of them, really in the consciousness of that I'm humble in front of God. It's not for their benefit. It's not, this is me taming myself, my inner self. The person is just the tool to help me do that. And usually the more arrogance they have, the better the tool they are, because they're even harder to become, to be humble in front of. But it's easy to be humble in front of someone else who's humble.
Sister, I have another.
Go ahead.
Something came up. I just, you know, reflecting. I'm like, there has to be a situation that I can relate to this, and I think it's a reference to having knowledge about something. Having knowledge about something sometimes equals being arrogant about it. Like, oh, I know this.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I was trying to think, where in my life am I arrogant? And I think that, yeah, sometimes I get frustrated with other people, and maybe my coworkers specifically. I'm thinking about like that I think I know, well, I know something, so therefore this is the right way. And so now I'm feeling very confident and arrogant about it, superior to that. So, and knowledge for me has that connection with arrogance, having certain amount of education or knowledge. And I think that one of the things that I've done as an action cure would be that I keep silent. I keep silent. That's been my my exercise. Instead of trying to, you know, like, yeah, I keep silent, like, and that's tough because I'm a talker. So that's been my challenge of like, you know, me in the past, I was so committed to, you know, speaking it and saying it perhaps, and like, you know, I need you to understand. And now I just, and I think that's my relationship with Allah, like giving it to Allah, like, you know what, if the opportunity comes, I'll share that, but I don't need to right now. Like, I realize that it's, you know, and sometimes are tougher than others. But I've definitely, in the past 2 years, feel like I've been practicing the sunnah of silence more than ever before. And and sometimes it's tougher than others. Sometimes it's like, oof, I have to walk away and be silent. Sometimes I could be in the room and be silent. So, and be okay with that. So that's my example.
That's an excellent example. Thank you, Sia. Yes, that was an excellent example. Yeah, it shows up in different ways. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would. For me, this sentence makes a lot of sense, and I will go back to what you were saying about pointing out the others. I would say that well, it happens to me many times to think, okay, if I'm doing this, or I'm thinking that I'm right, let's say, and the others are wrong because many reasons, they are violent, they are whatever. And this for me is arrogance. By the time we are judgmental, even if it's saying the other are right or the other are wrong, just to consider ourselves high enough to judge, it's already arrogance, whatever is the sense of it. Whatever we judge that it's good or bad. I'm again back to the Rumi saying. So for me, constrain unnatural manner is to try to be conscious every time I'm judging, I'm bringing judgment toward other people. That are negative or positive, it doesn't really matter. It's this intention to be judging that for me is a source of arrogance.
That's an excellent point. And I would add also judgment towards oneself. So
also, yes.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
So the judgment that's happening is starting on the inside of you. So that is coming from your internal ideas about right and wrong, good and bad, what should or shouldn't be. And those same judgments you put on yourself. You live your life through those same judgments, and those same judgments, and that dictates how you move, how you live your life. But those
also because
go ahead.
Because by the time you say these people are wrong, even if you don't say it, you are thinking I am right, and vice versa. So yes, if I say they are wrong, then yeah, the opposites should be true. Then I am right, and or if I'm wrong, then they are right. And so yeah, it's toward ourselves and toward the other. Yeah, agree.
That's right. And so what's happening externally is just a manifestation of what's happening on the inside of us. And so that's why we're learning to check what's inside of us first, and then that will help us really deal with how we're projecting ourselves onto other people, because those are ultimately projections, us taking the position of judgment, or thinking that we're in a position to judge. Yeah. Anyone else want to add anything? All right. So I'll read this ayah at the bottom. Bismillah. Those who behave arrogantly on earth in defiance of right, them will I turn away from my signs. Even if they see all the signs, they will not believe in them. And if they see the way of right conduct, they will not adopt it as the way. But if they see the way of error, that is the way they will adopt. For they have rejected our signs and failed to make warning of them. So here, God is giving us a definition or way to recognize arrogance in the world around us, right? He's talking about those who behave arrogantly on the earth in defiance of right. Being in arrogance is being in defiance of what is right. So instead of making our own judgments, right, this gives us a guideline for that, for understanding what we're seeing. And, you know, having our own understanding, somebody who presents themselves in a way that may seem arrogant to us may not actually be arrogant, right? So it can, that's why it's important to look inside of our own selves first, because we're always projecting, we're always seeing through our own lenses about what is arrogant, what is humility, and we're always making these judgments. And as Mathilde said, just in being in the position, feeling that we're able to judge, putting ourselves in a position to judge, that in and of itself is an act of arrogance. And so self-importance, I mentioned self-importance earlier. This really falls under all of those: conceit, pride, arrogance, self-importance. This is Uthman Damfodio. It says, it is impossible for you to remain truthful while there is self-importance in you. It is impossible for you to abandon envy while there is self-importance in you. It is impossible for you to abandon anger while there is self-importance in you. It is impossible to contain rancor while there is self-importance in you. It is impossible to offer good counsel while there is self-importance in you. It is impossible to accept good counsel while there is self-importance in you. You are not even safe from the contempt and slander of others while there is self-importance in you. O mankind, reverence your guardian Lord, who created you from a single soul, created of like nature, his mate, and dispersed from both of them many men and women. And that's to say, we're all connected, we're all from the same source. So how can you be more self-important than I? Or how can I be more self-important than you? Right? How can I be superior? How can I think myself better? Who am I to judge? It is very important. Anger, where are we at on time? Okay, we're getting close. Anger, there are 3 degrees of anger. This is an important one because anger is a fire, right? I don't know about you all, but I'm sure I've certainly been in an experience where anger shows up, and it, you know, these vices, they show up in the body, right? You feel them physically in your physical being. Sometimes it's in your chest, sometimes it's in your stomach, excuse me, sometimes it's in your head. And I don't mean like your mind head, but like physical, your head and your body tension, your shoulders, they show up in very strong ways. And so anger is one of those that shows up like,
they show up and stay if you don't deal with it, right?
Yes, they sure do. They sure, and they become
yeah.
they can manifest it. They manifest as illness, and we don't really realize how these inner vices manifest themselves in the physical, in our physical bodies. And so, but I feel it when it shows. I'm like, oh my God, like the shortness of breath, Like it's a real thing. So anger, there are degrees of anger. There are 3 degrees of anger: insufficient, excessive, and moderate. Insufficient anger is blameworthy because you are not angry enough to protest in defense of that which is sacred, right? Excessive anger, no. Excessive anger is also blameworthy and happens when overcome by anger so much that all coolness leaves the management of your intellect and way of life. And you no longer have insight, consideration, reflection, or choice. That's that flame, that excessive anger when it just takes over and you lose your cool, so to speak. I guess that's where that term comes from, huh? So there, and then there's the other degree of anger, is moderation. Praiseworthy anger is in moderation. It is the anger that waits for the indication of the intellect according to the path of submission. It arises when it is practiced by the law, by the Sharia, and it stops when it is criticized by the law, by the divine law. It is the middle way, that middle way we talked about when we were talking about ranking. There is no rank, right? It is the middle way. We are all the same in front of God, right? Messenger of God, may God bless and grant him peace, described this when he said, the best of affairs is their middle. So we're trying to get back to the middle way, the middle path, what's in between. Neither, because remember, these vices, their opposites are extremes too. So we want to ultimately get to the middle. It makes me think of, some of you are familiar with the Nation of Islam and their teachings back in the day. I mean, they're still here today, but I'll just say back in the day, were just pro-Black, all about empowering Black people and bringing them into the knowledge of themselves, into the knowledge of God, and the challenge, and then there's Orthodox Islam, which is we're all one, we're all Muslim, we're all like one brotherhood, sisterhood. It's not about, there's no Black or white, right? And so I know when I came into Islam, I originally adopted that idea of, okay, kumbaya, I'm not Black anymore. Right? We're all one. We're all this just beautiful humanity. And it wasn't until later that, I mean, that's the ideal, right? We are all one. But then later I came to understand that no, God did make us different so that we might know each other. And that's from the Quran. And there's a purpose in that. And so I was given the skin I'm in for a reason, as you were given the skin you're in for a reason. And so, I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent. Let me get back to anger. And so anger, I don't even remember where I was going with that. I apologize. So the harm of anger is that it has harmful effects on the body, the tongue, the limbs, and the heart. And then the knowledge cure for anger is one with insufficient anger must treat herself and her or himself until.
Sister, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You would start to say about anger, you start talking about the Nation of Islam. Yes. So I'm thinking that you were talking about how anger within the Nation of Islam ended up being a destructive thing, because there was anger associated with the pride, with being like, we're better than, or something like that. Maybe, I don't know if that's where you were going, but I was waiting for you to explain where you were going with the Nation of Islam anger, and I was like, what are you thinking there? So.
I'm glad you brought it up because I lost my train of thought. That wasn't where I was going, but that's an excellent point. But I think my where I was headed was that, with the idea of, Black empowerment through the Nation of Islam and then Orthodox Islam, that we're all just one person. Those are like these two extremes. And so the aim in between the two is that, no, I still have the skin that I'm in, but I'm still a Muslim. right? And I'm still part of the brotherhood, the sisterhood, connected in submission to the one creator. So, you know, the middle path is in between both of those. It's neither extreme, but it's in between. It's acknowledging that God created us all different, and then at the same time, and that's so that we might know each other and be in submission to him. But that is an excellent point that you made, Sister Sia, because it is out of the pride and out of the anger that, and it is out of that so many people moved over to Orthodox, is quote unquote Orthodox Islam, right? So it was necessary. I don't want us to think about these vices as necessarily, they're tools for us to use to move us back to where we need to be. They are important because without anger, there's no peace. There's no harmony. You have to have one. You have to have one to have the other. Both are necessary. Without hate, there is no love. Without love, there is no hate. But we just have to recognize that these are tools to point us back to the other direction, really, so that we can end up in the middle path, in the middle. And the knowledge cure is that one with insufficient anger, one who's not angry enough, must treat herself with her anger until her anger becomes stronger. Whoever lets her anger go to excess must treat herself until both of them return to the middle way between the two extremes. So that's a practical way of dealing with anger. If you don't have enough anger, treat yourself until your anger becomes stronger. You have to reflect on it. Let me see. Let me read this surah. Surah 133 says, 133 and 134. Be quick in the race for forgiveness from your Lord and for a garden whose width is that of the whole of the heavens and of the earth, prepared for the righteous. Those who spend freely, whether in prosperity or in adversity, who restrain anger and pardon men, for Allah loves those who do good. Hopefully that makes sense the way I read it. In Ecclesiastes, I wanted to include some Bible verses in here. Be not thou hasty in spirit to be angry. And that's that fiery anger, that excessive anger. It says, be not thou hasty in spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools, in the chest of fools. Proverbs 16:32, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. So self-restraint, self-control. The action cure opposite for anger is to say when you're angry, I seek refuge with God from the accursed shaitan. In Arabic, we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, right? If you are standing, then sit down. If you are sitting, then lie down. And to the lesser and make the lesser or the full ablution. Put some water on you. Wash off, right? Water puts out fire. So when you're angry, use water. Make wudu, if you make wudu, make ghusl. So those are some practical tools for those. And I won't continue on the vices. That's really, I think, it for the vices. Alhamdulillah, it is 3 o'clock your time, or time is it your time? 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
Yes, 11 o'clock your time. So let me see. Next week, we are going to, for sure, look at the worksheet. We'll probably focus on the worksheet that I sent out yesterday. I think that's it. If you
that worksheet was intense.
Say it again.
That worksheet is intense.
Yeah, it is intense. It is intense. You know, have fun with it. Have fun with it. and we won't go too deep, but I think it's important that we begin to peel back to scratch the surface. To scratch the surface. And the aim is not to condemn, it's really, again, not to condemn, but to understand how this conditioning has happened. Because if we're able to understand how it's happened with our parents and those who in whose house we lived and who raised us, then we can understand how it's happening to us and how it's happening with our children. And then we can put an end to some of these generational cycles that are happening, and we can begin to bring up, to be, and to be, bring up and to shape beings of peace in this world. Those who are coming behind us and in ourselves, with God's help. Are there any questions before we close out?
Sister Khadija, did you have, I don't know if you mentioned it before, have you read or been exposed to Louise Hay, the Heal Thyself?
Yeah, somebody gave, what's the name of her book?
Heal yourself, heal thyself, or I have the book, I just can't remember the exact.
You can heal your life.
It's called You Can Heal Your Life.
There it is.
Somebody gave me, I think somebody gave me that book a long time ago, or they either gave it to me or told me about it.
It is.
I haven't read it.
Like it has similar, the stuff with the parental heritage and parents and your line. It has that. There's a lot of concepts that relate to what I've been hearing from your classes.
Yeah.
It just reminded me of that. In terms of how your body takes these negative things, so it's about the disease process, right? We just kind of sort of mentioned it, that if you are holding anger, or where you hold it in your body and how it can cause a disease, and how you can heal yourself based on dealing with these issues, right? But she goes back through talking about the history and your parents and how you're raised and stuff like that. I would recommend you looking at it, even if you just, skim through the index. The ends of it, she has specifically, which I've always enjoyed looking. Sorry,
Tia, you went out. You said at the end of it, she has what?
Even if you don't read the book, if you go to the end, there's a table of content, like what I would say table, like an encyclopedia, where she goes through all the your body, head, fingers, toes, and says what ailment is connected. Like if you say I have tension in or headache, you go through it, you look for a headache, and then she'll tell you what the possible emotional thing is going on with you and the cure for it, like what affirmation you can say to help.
Wow.
So it's really specific. My godmother, Adimola, she actually shared that book with me. She's used it very much, and I'll use it still to this day. I'll look it up, like different things, like if it goes with your eye, your headache, any ailment of the body.
Yeah.
And she started her work during maybe like when HIV first came out back in California. And I think she was a therapist and dealing with people. I mean, she's passed on now. She's passed away a couple of years ago. I want to say 5 years maybe, but she has a lot of knowledge that is pretty special, and I think definitely has a lot of roots into universal truths. So.
All right. Well, I will definitely check her out. I will check her out today, or not today, Monday. Inshallah.
And can that book be shared on WhatsApp?
Yes, I will.
The author and the name.
I'll share it, and I'll show you. I'll show you. Definitely share some pieces from it so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Because and I'll be honest, I've never read it throughout. It gets because she gives you action steps like work. It's it's like this work that we're doing. It's tough. Yeah. So I take it with a grain, like I'll read a certain part. I'm like, and she's talking about her own life and different, she uses examples of other people's lives. So it's good. But the part about the family and the parents, loving them as a child, like she really goes through the healing part, like gives you a lot of examples of healing.
Thank you.
I've used that. Inshallah, it'll benefit you guys.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. Thank you so much, Sister Sia.
Yes.
Anything else?
We need all the help we can get.
Yes. Now, Sister Star, just to tell you, Sister Star and I are working on some skits. I think we tried it. We tried it kind of last week. We're working on some skits to try to drive home some examples of these, how these vices show up in our lives, because it can be so subtle, and it can be so challenging to take a self look. So we're working on that. We're also working on a workbook to help us kind of get through the day-to-day realities of these things when they show up, because it's so sudden and so quick and so fiery. And like she said, we need all the help we can get. So we are open. I am open to suggestions. I really want to incorporate more exercises into this. So if any of you in your experience, like I said, I'm in this nonviolent communication course. It's just chocked with exercises, and hopefully I can bring back some of those and incorporate that into, I plan to bring some of those exercises and incorporate them into what we do here. But if anyone has any recommendations, I'm so open to making this more beneficial to all of us and more practical. So please do share.
I love the worksheet. When I mentioned that it's tough, I want to say though, as I looked through it, I didn't do it. I was looking through it like, oh, okay, she wants me, okay. And but I thought, you know, alhamdulillah, this is because I've done this work before. I thought this is a perfect like review of where I am with this, and how I'm curious for myself how I would answer it today, where I would have, you know, 10 years ago. And I already feel the difference in my own life, but I thought this is I still said, I was like, okay, she's gonna make me work again, but that's okay, because that's part of the work. And we mentioned it in one of the classes before, the layers of it, right? Like you know, you feel like you've gone through certain, you're like, yes, I've accomplished this, but then there's something else that, alhamdulillah, I totally feel. Okay. Sorry, guys. Yes, baby. Give me 1 second. That I feel like it definitely comes from Allah. Like every time these trigger, like what you said you're working on, that it comes up. I feel like those are so many gifts from Allah, giving us opportunity to revisit those things, and to say, what do we, you know, with the new knowledge that we have, with the intellectual knowledge to the heart knowledge, like how do we apply them today now? Okay, so you know, I think that a lot of us, we're blessed to have a lot of cognitive knowledge of these things. Like we can define these things perhaps, but then to apply them, which is where I think that worksheet kind of comes into play, right? Okay, how do I apply this? And then to actually be in the moment, have that happen, and how do you respond? Right? That's the other one, right? Like be in that moment and go, okay, it's like you've been training, all this time to do something, and now you're in the, okay, do I do that? And like I have, mashallah, I've been blessed to have moments where I'm like, oh my God, I can reflect that 10 years ago, I would have probably, you know, done X, Y, and Z, and it didn't even come out in my heart. Like sometimes I think the first step is, sorry if I'm taking over time, but I'm being inspired to remember this. Like the first step is to maybe you're a negative anger or something, you're angry, and you know, you slam your hand down, and now that the next time you don't slam your hand down, because you know what, I'm going to take deep breaths instead, or, you know, there's like different layers of that. And then you get to a place where you're like, your heart isn't racing, you're not short of breath, and you say, I am very angry about this, and this is unjust, because I think that's important, right? We need to have anger, but now my heart is not racing, I've stopped punching anything or whatever, and I can just, you know, start making dhikr or something, or you know, reflect on how I'm gonna discuss this, because it's still a righteous anger, like how, you know, and you know, those are so many different stages, and if we could apply them to every single vice of our life. I've chose anger as one, because everyone has their different ones that are tougher to deal with than others. But yeah, thank you so much, Sister Khadija, for giving us this platform to discuss this. I have to tell you, like, I don't get to participate as often, but today I thought I wasn't going to. I wrote that I was going to leave, and I kind of left for a minute, but then I'm like, no, this conversation is too good. I need this in my life. So I really, really appreciate you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Sister Sia. Your contribution is so valuable, so welcome, and so appreciated. Thank you so much. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Anyone else before we close out?
Well,
I'm so happy that this is beneficial. I'm so appreciative.
I have a suggestion. We are talking about which kind of practical tools we can use, and I started to study, like you, Khadija, the NVC, nonviolent communication. In this process, we see the anger as a good opportunity to connect with what is in our heart, to connect what is alive. So now every time I feel I'm angry, I'm like, okay, that's the good occasion. So now take it. And what is really happening inside me? Behind the I'm angry against someone and this someone has made something wrong, I try to find just within me what is happening. So for me, it's it's like an opportunity. And I'm like, okay, what is hurting right now inside me? And I will just send you a video from Marshall Rosenberg, who created NVC, about anger specifically. So in case you want to watch it, it can be, for me, yes, it was super helpful.
Yeah, Mathilde is also studying nonviolent communication. Yes, she's my inspiration. So I'll do that. So yes, please do share that, Mathilde. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I think that's a great takeaway, especially, anger is a tough one. Especially, we like to say we have anger management issues, some of us. And so that's a great recommendation to use it as an opportunity, right? An opportunity to, an opportunity to do what, Mathilde?
To connect with our heart and to have to connect with what is alive in us.
Alive in us, that's right. Yes. Yes, to connect with what's alive in us. Yes, Mathilde, thank you.
And for those who don't get angry, because I love that you mentioned that today, some people don't have anger, right?
Right.
And that we need it.
Right.
And I started thinking, I know someone, my sister, we're like, get angry about this. Right. Because it's a catalyst, right? That there's that extreme, like it is a catalyst to, because then you become so oppressed sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't have that.
And to react where you about the acknowledgement, Khadija, on anger, it was written that if the anger is not, it's too slow, we have to make it stronger. How I read it is that if it's too slow, it's somehow we are also disconnected to what is alive, because we don't press it, we don't want to hear, but for sure we have something alive. It's just that we are like, we don't hear it. So for me, it's the same thing in both cases, or it's too strong or it's not strong enough. It's that we are disconnected. So yeah, it's the opportunity to dig inside.
Ooh, I have a lot of digging to do. Well, I do. I think I'm one of those disconnected people, but it's only through the nonviolent communication kind of work that it's another layer, right? It's another layer in language that made me really kind of dig deeper. I'm like, dang, I don't know how I feel. It's rare that I get angry. And even if I do, I don't call it anger. And maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But yeah, it's a whole process. So alhamdulillah, that's very good. I really appreciate that feedback.
I used to ask my sister, why doesn't she get anger? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Salam alaikum. Other classes started.
Okay, we have 15 minutes. Thank you, Sister Starlo, for the reminder. Go ahead, Sister Sia, because I would have kept on. Thank you.
I was just going to say that this is my older sister. She's about 8 years older than me. And I used to ask her, like, why don't you get angry? Like how, and it's more, and her demeanor is just more peaceful in general, but it's become, as I got older, I felt like it was complacency, and I was trying to understand her, like, why aren't you angry about this particular abusive situation? Like, it's a black and white thing for me. Like, there's no gray area. You should be angry and let's move on, right? Like, there is moments where you're like, I don't know. And we talk a lot, and she's not of the same faith. She's Christian, but she says, she's uncomfortable with anger. She doesn't like how it feels. And so therefore she'd rather not feel that. And so I would challenge her to say, yeah, but it's still wrong. Like, we're still, like, this act or whatever is still something wrong. Anyway, it's a continual dialogue. And I think it's also about the layers, right? Where are you at in that process, and being comfortable with that feeling and having someone to kind of hold your hand with that. Like, if it's a place where you feel uncomfortable, but it's like you still need to walk through it. And so, you know what I mean? So and for her, like, I've seen her, and because she doesn't know how to feel with that, I think it can be unhealthy then sometimes, because she doesn't, So as you say, because you say you don't hardly feel anger. It's like she's such a, and everyone loves being around my sister because she's always like she's easygoing about stuff. There's nothing that, like, she'll walk away, but it's funny because she is starting to express a little more, even because before she wouldn't even say I'm angry. She, like, even say like this. So now she'll like talk, but yeah, that did upset me. I was like, it upset you? That's great. So anyway, it's a process.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. All right, ladies. Well, we're gonna go ahead and close out. Thank you. That was a beautiful ending discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your contributions. Sister Habiba, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to add something before we close?
I just appreciate the class. I appreciate all you sisters. And like I say, we are a work in process. Yeah. And we can't be hard on each other. Just do the best we can do.
That's right. And don't be too hard on yourselves.
Yes, exactly.
Right. All right. Okay, so we'll close out. Thank you all. I love you all. I appreciate you so much. Really, I can't say enough. You keep my heart pumping. Alhamdulillah. I'm gonna read this prayer by Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba real quick. Let me pull it up. I have it handy at the end of the slides. And all right, I'll just read it. I won't put it on the screen. Bismillah, Ya Allah, Ya Baru, Ya Latifu, Ya Muwafi, Ya Man Lahu Amurwara, Ya Shafi. Send down your cure in place of illness and do not try us with tribulations. Send down benefit in place of harm, send down good in place of evil. Send down knowledge in place of ignorance, and send down generosity in place of miserliness. Send down wealth in place of poverty, send down thankfulness in place of ungratefulness. Cure all the believers now and protect them from fear and grief in the future. Make all of the scholars workers. Make all the workers sincere. Make all the sincere abstinent. Make all the abstinent good advisors. Make all the good advisors truthful. Make all the truthful successful. Inspire us, O Lord, that we may always serve the believers and be merciful. Grant them guidance and goodness through us, and repel from them our hurt and harm. Inspire us to love them for your sake, and inspire them to love us so that we may grow in nearness to you. Amen. Amen. All right, everyone. Thank you, sisters and Brother Khalid. And we'll see each other in 2 weeks and online on WhatsApp. All right, thank you. Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Alhamdulillah.
You got to click on the new link, Sister Star, in the other group. Hey, daughter.